currently Earth. And it was on August 31st in 1935 that our 32nd president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, signed the Neutrality Act. In a public statement that day, President Roosevelt said that the new law would require American vessels to obtain a license to carry arms, would restrict Americans from sailing on ships from hostile nations, and would impose an embargo on the sale of arms to belligerent nations. Most observers understood belligerent to imply Germany under its new leader Adolf Hitler and Italy under Benito Mussolini. It also provided the strongest language yet, warning other countries that the U.S. would increase its patrol of foreign submarines lurking in American waters. This was seen as a response to Hitler's March 1935 announcement that Germany would no longer honor the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which prohibited Germany from rebuilding her military. Concurrently, Adolf Hitler also immediately stepped up the country's submarine production. Although the legislation stated that the U.S. intended to stay out of foreign wars, Roosevelt insisted that the country could not foresee future situations in which the U.S. might have to amend its neutral stance. Noting that, quote, history is filled with unforeseeable situations that call for some flexibility of action, unquote, Roosevelt contended that the law would not prevent the U.S. from cooperating with other similarly minded governments to promote peace. In other words, he left plenty of room for America to change its mind regarding the sale of arms to friendly countries and gave it the right to exercise options to protect her own safety. This came to pass in March of 1941, when the passing of the Lend-Lease Act increased America's military exports to the British in order to help them fight off Hitler's advance towards England. It was on August 31st in 1985 that Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, is captured and nearly killed by a mob in East Los Angeles, California, after being recognized from a photograph shown both on television and in newspapers. James Romero was a teenager at the time. He also helped catch the Night Stalker in the summer of 1985. James Romero experienced a face-to-face encounter with Ramirez on a summer night back in 1985, the night Ramirez stalked his home in Mission Viejo, California. The teen was up late in the garage after a family road trip when he heard footsteps in the gravel. He looked right at me, Romero recalls. All of a sudden, I hear footsteps in the gravel. Crunch, 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 crunch. I could hear the footsteps literally stop right where I'm sitting. This was the recollection of James Romero the night he had a close encounter with the Night Stalker. Romero bolted into the house, woke up his parents, and they called 911. Ramirez took off, but not before the fearless teenager ran outside. I look and I see the car and I get part of the plate, he says. Detectives quickly figure out Romero encountered the Night Stalker. They didn't tell him, but he would soon connect the dots. With law enforcement hard at work, investigators continued to visit his house, asking him to look at random automobiles. They just kind of coached me, he recalled. Police eventually found Ramirez's car, and the teen confirmed it. With that confirmation, they lifted a fingerprint and identified Ramirez. It wouldn't be long until his capture. Seeing the Night Stalker in person was a moment Romero says he will never forget. As James Romero recalls, quote, "When I was in court, I was in the room sitting with him. You know, I was on the witness stand 8 hours. The defense attorney had me swear in, and they put the Bible, and they had me swear in right next to him," unquote. Romero says the moment was a terrifying experience, but he is glad he was able to help solve the case. And so are we. We're very thankful to Mr. James Romero. It was on August 31st in 1997, shortly after midnight, that Diana, Princess of Wales, affectionately known as the People's Princess, continues her eternity via a car crash in Paris. Princess Diana was 36. Her boyfriend, the Egyptian-born socialite Dodi Fayed, and the driver of the car, Henry Paul, continued their eternities as well. Princess Diana was one of the most popular public figures in the world. Her continuance of eternity was met with a massive outpouring of grief. Mourners began visiting Kensington Palace immediately, leaving bouquets at the home where the princess, also known as Lady Di, would never return. Piles of flowers reached some 30 feet from the palace gate. Diana and Dodi, who had been vacationing in the French Riviera, arrived in Paris earlier the previous day. They left the Ritz Paris just after midnight, intending to go to Dodi's apartment on the Rue Arsène Houssaye. As soon as they departed the hotel, a swarm of paparazzi motorcycles began aggressively tailing their car. About 3 minutes later, the driver lost control and crashed into a pillar at the entrance of the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. At the scene of the accident, it was determined that Dodi Fayed and Henry Paul had moved on into the eternity. Princess Diana was taken to Petit-Salpêtrière Hospital, and it was determined that she continued her eternity at 6 a.m. A fourth passenger, Diana's bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, was seriously injured but survived. Diana's former husband, Prince Charles, as well as her sisters and other members of the royal family, arrived in Paris that morning. Diana's body was then taken back to London. Like much of her life, her death was a full-blown media sensation and the subject of many conspiracy theories. At first, the paparazzi hounding the car were blamed for the crash, but later it was revealed that the driver was under the influence of alcohol and prescription drugs. A formal investigation concluded the paparazzi did not cause the collision. Diana's funeral in London on September 6 was watched by over 2 billion people. She is survived on this planet by her 2 sons, Prince William, who was 15 at the time, and Prince Harry, who was 12 at the time. All historic information divulged and documented on this audio file can be verified on cbsnews.com and history.com.